All right, Vicar can jump in. So, hey everybody, my name's Evan, and thank you so much for joining today. What we have in store for you is a little bit different than the usual webinars we do, where we just kind of talk about BuzzSumo and marketing. I think this has a good chance to be the most impactful one we've done. That's because we're going to focus on well-being and mental health. And the reason we're doing it is, we work with a lot of marketers. We have a lot of marketers on our team, and we've seen it. Something that hits everybody, but I think it's really something that marketers particularly have dealt with a lot over the past few years with the pandemic and everything else going on. When we've always sensed it, but we did some research in BuzzSumo, we saw that, the topic of burnouts increased 73% over the past few years. Social discussions are up 120%. Imposter syndrome conversations up 60%. This is all really since the pandemic. And then nearly 1 in 10 marketers are made redundant back in 2020. So there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in general that impacts everybody, but it really impacts the marketing world more directly. So what we're going to do today is we're joined by 3 really talented marketers whose work you've likely seen, you likely follow, and we're just going to have a really open forum and conversation, about how this impacts us, what strategies we have to deal with it. And I say we, I should say them more. You don't want to hear from me too much. And we're going to have an open conversation. If you have any comments, put them in the chat. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. We'll make sure we leave some time at the end of the call for Q&A. So we're joined today by John, Amanda, and Ryan. And I'll turn it over to them to let them introduce themselves quickly.
I'll kick it off. I'm Ryan McCready. I am the content marketing lead at Foundation Marketing. Probably seen some of our teardowns bumping around lately. And I've been working remotely, I guess I'm coming on 8 years. I've only worked remotely, so I've got a lot of experience with the ups and downs and then how it's changed in the pandemic. So I'm very excited to share that with everyone.
Go for it, John.
My name is John. I'm a content strategy consultant. So like Ryan, I've been working remotely almost my entire life. So this is really exciting. So I'm looking forward to this, and I'm sure we're going to have a great time.
And I'm Amanda. I am the head of marketing at Stacker. Prior to this, I was agency side for many, many years and have been remote for a majority of my career with a few stints in an office. Care a lot about mental health, so I love that BuzzSumo is doing this. And I'm looking forward to this conversation.
My name's Evan. I oversee the commercial teams for BuzzSumo, so you probably worked with me or my team if you're a BuzzSumo customer. And I'm here to lead the forum and just kind of make sure we have a really good, fun, entertaining, but enlightening conversation. So I think a really good place to start is just, why do you guys think this is important to talk about? What impact have you seen just the conversations around mental well-being and mental health have?
Yeah, I can kick it off again. So going from fully working remote to everyone working remote, it's been just a big change in the way that people communicate, I think. And you don't see that day-to-day up and down of people's emotions, of what they're working on, if they're struggling with. It's a little harder to get them to open up, obviously, because you're behind a screen. You might not get those casual conversations in office. So just being able to open yourself up to those and talk to other people is so important now. And I think people don't know how to kick those conversations off, or how to have kind of an emotional support person at their company or in their life when they're working remotely.
Yeah. So also I think as marketers, a good deal of our work is more of thinking, analysis, logic, and emotions. So and all of this boils down to our mental being. So if you're not in a good state of mind, you may not be able to do good work. So it's a good thing that well-being and mental state of mind of marketers and workers in general be taken seriously. So I think it's a serious topic.
Yeah, to add, the only thing I want to add is that the stigma for this conversation in general has always been pretty bad. It has gotten much better in the last few years, I have to say. We've come a long way, but I think of all the spheres, work is one of the toughest. I think that's the hardest place to bring it up for a lot of people. And especially when you're just inundated with wins and people's successes, and a lot of these conversations come up on social media, we can get a little we can get even more hesitant to bring it up. We think maybe it's only us who are struggling. We don't really know who to ask. So that's why I think, especially to have this conversation in this space is so important.
I mean, I think those are a really good point that for all, for all the terrible things that came out of COVID, I think there's been a big uptick in people's willingness to talk about well-being, in general, but particularly at work. I think overall in the last like 10 years, people are more open to talking about it in their personal lives. But I think in the last 2 years, I've seen a huge difference in people's willingness to talk about, but we're still not quite there yet. I don't think so. Hopefully these little,
We'll be iterating for, to use a marketing word. Yeah, we'll be iterating for a long time.
let's keep a marketing focus. We're going to iterate on it. It's a challenge. It feels awkward sometimes, I think. And what I've seen a lot of times is like companies are willing to talk about it, or at least put it onto their Twitter feed that they're willing to talk about it, but it's still hard to kind of go to your manager and say, hey, I'm struggling, or go to your peers and say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you guys faced anything like that at your roles or with people? Like, have you, particularly working remotely, have you seen those support systems being built up a bit more?
I feel like just since I've been doing it so long, I've kind of built myself one over the past 7 years, just having those people inside, outside work that I can talk to. But since I've been at Foundation, we've been really striving to build that up as well. We have weekly, they're called COA sessions, and it's a weekly kind of mental health workout is what they're calling it. And for 8 weeks, you go in and you just talk about strategies to help you kind of figure out this new world and this new stress and working remotely and all that. And it's been really good. Like I kind of went in with it kind of with a because I've done a lot of those in the past with other companies, but it's been really, really helpful. So I'd check it out if you guys are curious.
Yeah, to Ryan's point, the importance of building like not just your in office quote unquote network, but like making sure you have supports outside of work, even in the industry. Like this is the first time I think the last couple of years that I've had a mentor, and I like didn't ever think to do that. But having other people outside of the ones like the people you're directly working with can be really helpful to give you perspective and help just give you more context.
And honestly, just like DM people in the field. Like I talk to so many people that I shouldn't talk to. Like I feel like I'm so under their level, but I'm just like, hey, what's up? And then you become friends with them, and then you have that extra support system. Like send me a DM if you want. I will talk to you. I am very open to that. It's just I feel like people are scared sometimes to reach out to people because they don't feel like they're at that level yet. But everyone's happy to talk. I feel like everyone in marketing Twitter is very open and probably struggling with the same thing. So you just have to ask them.
Yeah. So I think what I've tried doing, unlike Ryan and Amanda, I'm from the freelancing end. So I don't have a team of dedicated colleagues. So what I do basically is I connect with people on LinkedIn. So I have a goal of speaking to at least one person via video every month. So every week will be very difficult to keep up with. So I've given the goal of every month I jump on a call. So last week I spoke with Boyan from content distribution, and it was a nice conversation. I think building such communities really help us in the marketing space, even more in the remote kind of work.
It's really interesting. You guys kind of all mentioned the marketing space to some degree. Like there seems to be some like fraternal aspects to it, of people want to help out each other. But I think we talked about before, and we kind of seen some statistics that like these well-being issues particularly strike hard at marketers a lot of the time. Do you have any thoughts on why that might be, in the sense of, is it because the industry moves so fast and there's so much pressure to keep up, or do you feel like you're on an island sometimes from the rest of the organizations or teams you work with?
From my point of view, I feel like my work is extremely creative and it has my voice and my blood, sweat, and tears in it. And when something goes wrong, it hits you at your core. Like it's not like you're doing something else. It's like you're putting a lot of yourself into that project, into that idea, into that essay or whatever you're writing. So I think being that invested and having someone swat it down or say this is terrible or whatever, it hits you a little differently than like this spreadsheet isn't great. Like there's something like that, like something more or less tangible.
Yeah, like I don't know. I have no idea why, like marketers overall, I can only speak from my own experience, which was like in 2020, I was marketing director and I had to bring in leads. And when you have that much responsibility on yourself, that can feel pretty intense. Like, oh, the health of this company can depend on how well I do my job. So, and it doesn't have to be that you're like, oh, you're responsible for the lead flow. It could be like, I have to create whatever you're creating, like Ryan's like he's creating, like you can put a lot of pressure on yourself. It's important to dial back and be like, okay, this is not life or death. That's what that's what anxiety will feel like, life or death.
I think
Yeah. That is very correct. I think just like Amanda said, I just had it in mind. Marketing is like the lifeblood of the business. So it's like there's a lot of pressure. You serve almost everybody in the industry, in the company. You serve marketing. You work towards achieving business goals and each of them. And also there are a lot of tactics and principles in marketing. So today you go on LinkedIn, you see one new marketing stunt. Tomorrow you see a new one, and rest of them. So it helps to be a member of a community, to keep in touch, to always learn, and also to bounce ideas around. So the other day I was speaking with Boyan, and we spoke a lot about LinkedIn and how businesses can use LinkedIn. And I learned a whole lot from that conversation. So I think that is why we're always looking for ways to join communities, speak up, learn, and rest of them. So the industry is always moving very fast, like Evan said. So your personal studies may not cover everything. So this community helps in widen your scope of knowledge and get to the normal. So I think that's why.
Jumping off something Amanda said, I think when you're in marketing roles, you're sometimes just thrown in the deep end and said, figure it out. Like I've seen a lot of people like that, and you're like, where do I even start? And then you just spiral or you spin in circles as you're trying to figure it out. And another kind of point that is so bad about marketing is we have so much access to data that you can check if something is going right or wrong or great, like in a second. Like you can jump on analytics and see it, and then like you get looking at those analytics every day, and it just keeps punching you in the gut if something's not working. Developers don't have that problem. Like if something's not working, they just kick the can down the street a little bit, so they have another couple of weeks to work on it. But we've always got that data in front of us, and we've been like conditioned so hard to tie everything back to data, tie everything back to conversions, that you kind of have that, if it's dropping, you've got that negative blinking light just hitting you in the face every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And go back to Amanda, something else you kind of talked about a bit is that, this ties with what Ryan was talking about also, that marketing, you're really on the front lines. Like your job during COVID, during the height of the pandemic in 2020, is go get leads. And, I've seen it in like poorly run organizations, and it's kind of a stereotype that marketing is kind of punching back sometimes in the rest of the organization for the rest of the business, because it's the most public. You can say the leads aren't good, or we're not getting enough leads. And that's the reason that things aren't working. It's not the product, it's not the sales team.
And then hilariously, it's like the first department to get cut or defunded when things are in crisis.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we're giving you less money, but make it happen.
Very,
cool.
very
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, it's very true. And I guess my question is like, you're a marketing leader. How do you get around this? It comes out of processes, it comes out of relationships, some combination of the two.
Well, I mean, I think like, I just want to make the point to validate anyone who's feeling stressed or like, it's not you. Okay. Like I want this conversation to be like, we've all felt that way. It's not that you're not doing a good enough job.
No.
Like that, I think is like a really important thing to touch on. And I think it literally is like, you have to just set a boundary for yourself. That's like, I'm just going to do the best that I can during work hours. And that's all I have to give. Like, I think boundary setting was something I didn't know existed a few years ago. Would have been great to have learned when I was younger, but it applies at work. So, like I said, it's not life or death. So I think something that's really difficult for people, especially working from home, is like, how do you cut this off?
Yeah.
In a healthy way. So it's not your life's responsibility to complete your work objectives. You have a certain amount of hours that you work. You just show up the best you can that day and do what you can.
Yeah.
That's it.
My first step to fight that is I remove Slack from my phone, and it has made my life so much better. Like I don't, if I get an email from someone after work hours, I just snooze it to the next morning, unless it's like the blog is on fire, everything's broken. Like, yep. I'll answer that. But if it's like, hey, can you check this out? I'm like, snooze to the morning. So just shifting all of that off your personal devices is great. I took it off my personal computer. I mean, I've got no connection to work, and my colleagues know that. They're not going to send me a Slack message at 10 o'clock at night because they know I'm not going to look at it. So those little small things that you can do to take back your time and just set those boundaries go a long way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very, very true. I think in addition to what Ryan said, I think I started learning that this year. So I've discovered that a huge part of what affects productivity on my end and my ability to get to work is constant communication on the phone. So recently I updated my OS on my iPhone, and I created a list of do not disturbs. I have one for working, one for reading, and the rest of them. So I think just like Ryan said, there should be some boundaries to help you actually get some time for yourself and actually do good work actually.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I'm trying to follow, and I'll hopefully get there.
Oh, I know. Well, that's the other thing, right? Like, we're all going to fail at this over and over and over again.
I will say that my Slack time has been replaced by my Twitter time. So I don't know if it's like one good thing replaced with a bad thing or whatever, but yeah.
And to take what Amanda said earlier, we're all going to iterate, right? Like, I think if you try to set yourself up to say, no, tomorrow and be perfect at setting boundaries, you're going to, fall on your face and get frustrated with yourself. It's just trying to do a little bit better, each day.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. I think that leads into another really big topic, which is the pandemic and working from home. So you all mentioned you were all remotely working before the pandemic. Do you think that made it a bit easier in the transition for you? And like, as a follow-up to that, were you able to kind of identify struggles other people were having because you kind of said, no, I've been there, I've done that?
Yeah, as morbid as this sounds, I kind of was like, now you all are doing it. After I struggled with it for the past 5 years, I think I was the only remote person at Vengage for a while, and it wasn't set up perfectly. So I always was getting left out of meetings and stuff like that. So I'm like, now you're all in it. Now you know the struggle. So I think everyone going through that has made it better for when it's more hybrid, when we return to normal and stuff like that. They know the struggles. They know what remote people are going through because they had to do it. And I think before that, it was oh, I'll work remotely one day. I know what it's like. But now when you do it for almost 2 years, you kind of figure out the struggles, you figure out what people are going through instead of just working remotely once a week or something. It's a big difference. So I am happy that it kind of opened their eyes to that, because I think it made the company better. It made, and it'll make kind of the return to work easier.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one thing I want to do is just kind of ask the audience a bit. I'm going to launch a poll, and we're just curious, pre-pandemic, did you mostly work office-based, hybrid, or remote? Kind of, let's see if your experiences match ours. So you're seeing quite a bit of office-based, and that was me. I was entirely office-based. It was a tough transition to go hybrid. Still working on it, still iterating there. All right, so I got a good amount of answers then. And I'm surprised to see, I think, particularly considering this is a pretty marketing heavy group, that we're seeing a lot of people kind of have that journey of being in an office and then abruptly.
I feel for you. Yeah. I feel that's tough. Well, Ryan made the point earlier where it's you no longer have a built-in physical people being around you support system, and then we were torn away from all of our other support systems for so long. No wonder people are struggling right now. It's a recipe for that.
Yeah.
I can speak for myself. What happened was the office was good at setting those boundaries for me, because I worked in the office, and I would take my laptop home. I can do a lot of extra work. I was on my Slack on my phone, but I would work in the office. And I remember the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, and we work in the information and data space, so it was really busy for us. There were people asking us for trend reports, on the pandemic, but I was just working 15 hours a day because I didn't know what else to do with myself. I was all of a sudden I went from being out and about in the office and to being locked in my apartment, isolated. And I think it's been a hard journey I think that's not just me. I think a lot of us have had that journey of how do we separate our work life from our personal life when it's not done for us, by having the office.
Yeah. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel the remote life is a funny trap, because you end up working sometimes more hours than you'd have done if you're in an office. So it will require sometimes I work, like you said, I work from morning to, let's say, 8 p.m. and that's grossly like 12, 14 hours. Or if I was in an office, or if I were in an office, 9 to 5, I'm back home. So it required a new learning curve. So I had to draw back. It started affecting my health, so I had to draw back. I'm like, man, this is a remote work and not a machine. So I actually added placed deadline. So what I did was, before it was 10 p.m. I stopped working. Then I drew it backwards, 8 p.m. Stop working. Now I'm thinking of taking it even to 6 p.m.
Do it.
Because
Okay. Gotta set those boundaries.
I'm thinking of taking to 6 p.m. So the idea is it will help me cover some time for myself, because beyond my work, I'm also a human being. I have other needs, and also it will help increase my focus. So when I know by 6 p.m. I should be done, or I should close my laptop, then I won't waste my time on social media, talking to friends, or playing around the house. So I'm alone in the house. I could just go to my living room and start watching TV or something. But when you know you have a deadline, you kind of keep and stick to it. So it's like a trick I'm working on, or I've worked on, to kind of replicate the office life at home. So you know, when it's 6 p.m., the bell rings, the doors are closed, you have to go home and rest of them.
Yeah. That was in my early days. I would do the 12-hour thing. Like I would just like sit down, 8, done at 8, do that. And I just burnt out so bad that like I was clenching my jaw so bad. I mean, it was bad. But now, like, I think one thing that I taught a lot of the people when they started working remotely is just like treat it kind of like you're going to the office. Like have a set space that you're going to, that you start at 9, that you're done at 5, and then put your computer in that spot and don't look at it. Like I come up to my office, it's just in the second floor of my house, and I don't go in there unless I'm working. Like it's just completely disconnect. So having that ability to just like turn it off and not look at it is, I know everyone can't do that, but it's how I figured out how to hack it.
Yeah, Ryan, I think I need to get a bigger house to be like you. A house with more rooms.
I mean, just take your computer and just like throw it in the closet. Just don't even look at it. If you look at it, I mean, I feel like you're like, oh, maybe I'll go check that tweet. Maybe I'll check those analytics and for an hour.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I was living in a studio where my bed was right next to my desk, so that was a fun adventure. So anybody in that situation, I understand.
Yeah, I also think
put over it, just be like, don't touch.
Yeah, for those that can't throw away your laptop like Ryan, there's a little trick. There's a little trick you can use. I think I read this book, Deep Work, by Cal Newport. I think most of us have seen the book. Yeah, that book really it changed the way I saw work. So what I do is I set an alarm. Okay, so it's like a calendar. It sets from Monday to Friday. So 30 minutes to the time of end of work, I get a reminder. Stop work by 8, stop work by this time. So if you're lazy, or if you have particular tasks to round up, you get to it and you finish it. So it's still flexible, but that particular reminder helps me to understand that I'm working overtime and I should wrap up and stop. So if you can't throw away a laptop like Ryan, you can set up a timer and stop, and be the discipline to stop when it's time to stop.
I think another good hack, if you can't do that, is like, I know we can't do this now, but like setting a time that you're going to the gym or you're going to something where you can, that's not negotiable in your brain, where you're like, at 6 o'clock, I have to go to the gym. So that means I need to stop at 6 o'clock. And then it kind of helps you plan your day too. I feel like you're more productive. You have something at the end of the day that you're like either looking forward to, or you like have a hard stop on, because you're like, oh, I need to get all this done, instead of like, oh, I've got time to do it. And then you're working until 8 o'clock just because you pushed it off at 9 a.m. or something like that. So that's how I try to hack it too, is just like have something hard stop that you have to be done with work at that time. Yeah,
Ryan, you know, in November last year, I was going to the gym, and that really worked for me. Yeah, I think I resume my gym membership now to get back on that track.
Good for your brain.
All right.
Good for your body, good for your brain.
All right, nice. And one thing I want to do now is run another poll quickly, just the opposite of the first one we did. You know, what's your preferred way to work now? We all kind of got a taste of the remote life, a lot of us coming from offices. I'm curious to see, you know, what people's preferences are. And my guess is a lot of people are going to say hybrid. Interestingly, I'll share the results in a second. One person said office so far. No one wants to be full-time 9 to 5 days a week back in the office. All right, so we got one. I think I challenged you, but let's see. I'm gonna end the poll now and share the results. And lots of people are interested in hybrid work. And lots of people interested in remote work as well. So I think the pandemic really shifted, how we're approaching this.
Well, it's the value of flexibility in your life and being able to prioritize other things, like working out. I like working out in the middle of the day. I don't want to have to wake up earlier to work out or like be exhausted at the end of my workday workout. Now I can just go to the gym at 1 p.m. And I guess you could have done that in an office, but it's much more of a, like, it's in my building. It's so easy. I can jump in the shower. It's like so much easier. Like, I think once you get a taste of that part, it's hard to let that go. Now, I would love to have meetings in person. I would love to have like meeting days in person and then do my work at home.
Yeah.
Maybe that, I don't know if that's how other people feel about it, but having some interaction with people outside of Zoom would be nice, but not mandated all the time.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Very nice. I think there was a time I was home for so long, I think for an entire week I didn't go out. So it got so much, I just stood up one day, I went to the cinema to sleep off.
Just take it away.
I just went there, I'm telling you, I just went there to sleep. I think I went there to watch a movie. I forgot the name of the movie. The movie started, I slept off. I woke up, they were still showing the movie. I had to leave because I was done with my sleep. So sometimes it really helps to see humans. Looking at the computer screen for a long time can get very, should I use the word, should I use the word boring? I don't think boring might be the best word, but it gets to you. So like Amanda said, seeing humans at times, it's very useful. I think, yeah.
Even though I'm so high and always promoting remote work, I do love the hybrid. Every quarter, Bengage would fly me up for a week just to work from the office. And I mean, they're in Toronto, so that was kind of a big thing to do. But it was nice because I got to meet all the new people. I got to see how everything's rolling. I got to catch up with all my friends. And I'm still friends with people I work with. I talk to them every day from Bengage. It's just they built in that, like, even though you're remote, you're still kind of part of the team. And then we had yearly retreats too. We'd go up to the Thousand Lakes, I think, north of Toronto, and just including the remote people in those day-to-day stuff, even if it's once a week, every quarter, just like builds such a good relationship. And you get to meet all the new people that you want, like the developers I might never talk to, stuff like that outside of your team. So it's not really hybrid, I guess, but it's like having that in-office component where you can go and kind of chill with everyone. It could be a retreat. It could be just a meeting in some city that everyone goes to. It's just having that kind of like human interaction. So important.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat mentioned being an extrovert. I'm also an extrovert, and it is brutal to I'm not talking about normal work from home. I'm talking about pandemic work from home, because normal work from home, you can go to a coffee shop, you can go see your friends after you're done working, but when you're trapped at home and you're working with nobody and your energy comes from other people, and yet the only time you're talking to other people is on Zoom, which just doesn't have the same effect. It can be really difficult. So I have no solution to this. I'm just saying for everyone out there, you're not alone.
I think I read an article, I think that was last week, and the entire conclusion of the article was working remotely depends on your personality, and they were trying to make a case for extroverts finding it very difficult to work remotely. So
I had a system before the pandemic where I was leaving the house every day after work, and that's the only way I could balance it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting. I'd like to see that article.
Yeah, I think I'll look for the link. I think I've lost it. I'll find it and send it to you again.
Yeah, I think I think having spots that you do different types of work is also a good way to get around this. Like, I'm at my standing desk right now because if I was sitting down, I would be asleep. Like I need to be up and moving a little bit when we're in these long meetings. So I take all my meetings at my standing desk. But if I need to lock in and write a 2,000 word essay, I'll go to the coffee shop. I know that's not available for everyone right now, but just having kind of like spots that you know where you're going to do that deep work kind of helps you stay really productive too.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's a good segue to talk about productivity, and I think there's a kind of a trap when you're working from home when it comes to productivity. I mean, we talked about it a little bit that you have that guilt, always that I should be working, and Ryan, you made the great point of like, check your computer in the closet, get it away from you. I think we all learned that to some degree, but how do you all approach that of trying to be productive while not demonizing yourself for not getting everything done immediately the way you probably want to when you work from home?
I think just having realistic timelines in your head. We use ClickUp to kind of track all those and not getting down on yourself if something takes longer. My schedule right now, I block out everything. Like on my calendar, it's 2 hours to do this. It's 45 minutes to do that, just to make sure I'm like following that. If it takes longer, it takes longer. And then I just shift things to the next day. Like Amanda said earlier, we're not saving lives here. Like we're marketers. Like it's not the biggest deal. If something gets shifted, deadlines are made up unless it's like a launch. So don't have to get too down on yourself if you miss a deadline. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's in the back of your head, just kind of like keep that in mind is one thing that I learned. Like I used to be so like, oh, we got to get this out. I'm gonna work 12 hours. I'm like, okay, I'll run it tomorrow. It's not that big a deal if we push the launch back a week, a month. It's still gonna come out.
Yeah, something I realized. Oh, go ahead, John.
Okay, yeah. So I think that is very helpful, like Ryan's idea. So I think one way I try to improve productivity is I'm a planning freak. I say that I plan my months, my week, and my day. So at the beginning of the month, I know what I have to do. Let's say write 4 articles I'm writing, work for a number of hours for a particular client and the rest of them. And at the beginning of the week, I do the same. At the beginning of the day, I do the same. So that really helped me to articulate what I have to do that particular day. Okay. Then just like Ryan has mentioned, I try to attach some timelines, some duration into each of the tasks. But if it goes beyond that time, it goes beyond it. I don't think the time was written on stone. But I don't have a policeman with a gun on my head telling me I must finish the work at a particular time. Yeah. So if it goes beyond the time, yes, but that particular time constraint helps to build focus. Okay. So you don't have the entire day to write an article. You have just 10 hours or 5 hours. So you get to it. At that point, you are more inclined to turn off your Twitter, your WhatsApp, your Facebook, because the WhatsApp is always there, but you just have 5 hours for this task. Okay. Yeah. So it helps to build that kind of focus, but it is in a context of flexibility. Okay. So you don't shoot yourself, you don't hang yourself or cry over it if you miss a particular time duration, you move it to the next day, like Ryan said. But having a particular time helps to build focus, especially in the remote setting, because in the remote setting, you think you have the entire day. You can wake up in the morning and decide and start working by 12 in the afternoon. That's the kind of the trap in remote life. But you have to understand that you don't have the entire day. So you have to actually get down to plan and try to work with a particular time frame.
Yeah. I think one thing that I set early in my career is like my baselines too. Like if you know that writing a 2,000 article is going to take you 4 hours, then you set it for 4 hours. Like I know that I can write 1,000 words in an hour. And then you find out what your baselines are. You know that like, oh, creating this slide deck is going to take me 2 hours. So just like thinking about it in that way and being very honest with how long it's going to take instead of just like putting arbitrary, like I'm going to work on an article for 4 hours. You're like, oh, I'm going to write a 3,000 word article. That's going to take me 6 hours and it's going to take an hour of research. So that's the whole day. And then not being too hard on yourself when it takes the whole day to write. Because in those 6 hours, especially in a creative field, like you're not writing the entire time. And I think people can get down on themselves when they're doing creative work, because some of that creative work is just like staring out the window, like just thinking about what you write. And I think if you're trying to work yourself to death just to get an idea out, it's never going to come out. You gotta have that built-in time to stare out the window, to take a walk, to do all that stuff.
That's a really good point, because it's like listening to you, Ryan, listening to you and John, it was really interesting to hear that you're able to block out your time and it being in the week or what do you want to do. And I'll be transparent. It's a thing I've always struggled with. And maybe that's inherently that I'm not a marketer and you guys are all much more used to having to block out that time. But I think, Ryan, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you talked about needing that downtime, that creative time. You know, for me, what the trap I fall into is if I say, well, my work's project based, I'm going to work on this project. And it's a big boulder. I have to move and speak several months. And some of that time might just be me sitting there and kind of thinking. But then when I do that, I feel guilty because I have 100 emails in my inbox and 30 Slack messages. And, you know, I need to talk to a customer or something like that. It always piles up. Do you guys have any strategies to try to kind of blood out those distractions, or just that you've done over time and got better at over time?
Well, something I was going to say, I really like the suggestions that they have, but I'm similar to you, Evan, where I can't always. I realized at the beginning of the pandemic that sometimes I have to go with where my head is that day. So I might put things on my calendar and allow myself to move them when they're for me. So if I think, okay, Tuesday it's going to be my writing day, and then Tuesday morning I'm like, it's not going to be my writing day. I mean, it could be, but it's not going to go super well. I think that was very important, because you know, I think you can feel really like ashamed, like, why can't I schedule this? This is my writing day. Why can't I sit down and write? But you have to go with where you're at that day, and you're not always going to be able to plan that.
Yeah, you can't force yourself to be creative. You have to be in the mindset. And I think my best ideas come when I'm locked into that, or I'm excited about an idea, and you have to kind of stumble in that organically. You can't just be like, and that's what I'm trying to really impart on a lot of our creators right now, is like, you have to be in that headspace of ready to create. You have to be setting yourself up for success, I guess, instead of just like trying to force yourself to do it. You have to be curious. You have to have all those things set up before, and then sometimes you stumble onto an amazing essay that you write. Also, I found that when I'm writing, like the first hour is just getting in that headspace. Like you might not write a single word in that first hour, but you're getting your mind ready to write. You're getting your mind ready to create. You're kind of setting an outline. You're doing a little bit of research. You're blocking out all the distractions. So I've figured out that like kind of add an hour to what you want to do really helps kind of transition into that creative mindset.
Yeah. I also think when I started the entire aspect of planning the day and the month and something, just like Amanda said, at the point you feel ashamed that you were unable to finish a particular task. So it was something I struggled for a long time. Then until I realized that these timetables, they are not tyrants. I created them. Okay. So they are guides, they are not your rulers. Okay. So if it happens that a day came where let's say you schedule today, you're going to work on a video, you cannot. Just you are the controller of that. You own that particular. It's like a strategy. You create like a war plan. So you go ahead and re-strategize for given the present situation. You know, most times when we make plans, it's based on what we know. So I can decide to plan for the entire day. Let's say it's 12 p.m. over here. I'll make assumptions. I can tell myself I'll be at home from 12 to 6. So between this time I'll work on this. But something might happen, and an emergency might occur, or a friend might come around. Then I have to draw back to rearrange the plan. Okay. So the idea is when you have a plan, you work towards it as a guide, not as a ruler or as a tyrant. Then if there are modifications, if things happen, what you do is you come back and rearrange based on the new information you've gathered. So don't make it a ruler. Don't let it make you feel ashamed at the end of the day. Just take control of it. See as a tool to actually take charge of the day. So you are in control with timetables and everything.
Yeah, there's that famous quote where like everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I feel like that's every single Monday. Like everyone comes into the week and then you wake up and you have 8,000 Slack messages and something's broken and you need to get a blog post up or something like that. So like everyone comes into the week with a plan and then it falls apart. So don't beat yourself up for changing the plan and reacting. Like I think that's a really good skill to have, is reacting on the fly and changing your schedule so you can hit all those tasks without burning out, I guess.
That was really insightful. There's a lot of great advice buried in there, so I'm going to rewatch this. But I also just want to point out there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the chat. that I'm going to follow up
Yeah.
on the call.
I
I'm
can-
kind of trying to read it and follow as best I can.
I'm following up gradually. It's interesting.
Yeah, the chat's awesome. Y'all like
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all of your experiences and the things that you
Yeah.
all do. I think it like points to there's no one size fits all. Like
For sure.
take everything everybody's saying and try what you think is going to work for you and test them out. But like nothing
Yeah.
that any one person does is going to apply to all of us.
And it's evolving. Like the stuff I did early in my career, if I did it now, it would like kill me. Like working those 12 hours and having Slack and answering emails at midnight and stuff like that. I'm like, why did I do that? But yeah, so it's an evolving process. You're not going to find it. Like you have to go through it, figure out what works for you.
Yep.
It's a great point.
100%.
Yeah, you told me early in my career, it doesn't matter if you respond to every Slack message in 30 seconds. I want to believe you, but it's absolutely the case. So I think everyone's going through that journey themselves and we just provide guideposts as best they can. Cool. So let's run another poll. Just one last one we're going to have for the day. And this one's about well-being in the workplace. You know, what we're curious about is how much does your company, the people you work with, if you're a freelancer, talk about well-being in the workplace?
I'm
we
really
can vote.
interested to see
Interesting.
this.
I would have loved to vote,
It's like you hear that the improvements are happening. I just wonder how ubiquitous that is. Like, okay, some companies are moving forward. How many are? Like, are
Yeah.
most people still kind of like stuck at companies that do things the old way?
It's interesting. I think there's a difference between talking about it internally and externally. I've seen a lot of companies like post
Yeah.
great Twitter messages, and you hear terrible things internally about what it's like working there.
Yep.
So let's see. Let's end the poll. And it's what we're seeing. I'll share the results. Is that people are, there's a pretty big split. It's pretty even right now. I mean, companies that talk about it all the time or every now and then, and companies that talk about it almost never. It's pretty interesting to see that we're still not all the way there.
No, no, which, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. I will say this is just kind of like a plug for a company I used to work for. There's a program called Mental Health First Aid. And if you feel like comfortable proposing it, you can have an instructor come in and teach your leadership or the whole company different ways to talk about these things. Because if you think about like companies are made up of human beings who none of us were really ever trained in talking about mental health. This is not something we had in our childhoods for the most part. It's not taught to us in school. And I think the reason why people struggle to talk about it is just like we have no framework for it. We have no history with it. So that's one way. If you're like, this is bad where I am, like that's a program, company can get behind programs. They like to, they'll invest in something if it's like, oh, other people have done this. There's a lot of companies that have used mental health first aid. That's like one of the many ways you can maybe try to propose, hey, like people are really struggling or we just need the language. This is one way you can get that language.
100%. Yeah, we like I said earlier, we use COA and it's the same thing. It's just like it's a program, and I think it's a lot easier for companies to invest in that than try to like do it internally. Like, they do it so well, and I think most of what they're teaching is like how to talk about it too. It's like how to identify what's not going well and how to address it. And one of the things we did, I think 2 weeks ago in one of the classes was just like, we created a doc that we're asking new employees how they like to be communicated to. Like if something happened, like if their grandma died or something like that, do you want to be talked to immediately? Do you need time? Do you need all that stuff? So we've got this document that everyone's got their answers to, like, how do you want to be communicated to? How do you want to be supported? How do you want all those different things that companies don't ask? I think it's hard because you're so used to just communicating in kind of a professional manner. How do you communicate in a personal manner is just as important when something happens in your life.
I love seeing all these mental health first aiders in the chat. That's awesome. I love to see that people are getting that training. But yeah, that's really cool, Ryan. Like, I think it really illustrates like how many different levels different companies are at. A lot of them are trying to play catch up and they just don't know how. They don't know how. But that's why, like, Ryan said you can reach out to him. You can reach out to me if you're feeling like, I don't know who to talk to in my company. Unfortunately, we don't all individually have the power to make decisions like, on a corporate level, right? Like you can know what needs to change, but there's only so much that we can do. So that's where those external supports come in. So you can figure out what the best way to move forward for you is. And that's, this could be a whole separate webinar if you're like really don't know what to do in your current job, but everyone's going to be in a different spot right now.
I think freelancers are should change in this conversation because we work alone. We don't have a particular CEO or HR to talk to. So how do you think freelancers can? Okay, this is me asking a question now. How do you think freelancers can? What ideas do you have for freelancers in the audience to actually go about this, since they don't have any corporate structure to do that?
That's really tricky, but I think I fall back on that, just like building out your external support system, just like I do. Like, I mean, it's tough to send those DMs to people that seem scary, that seem like they're way above you in the field, but that's how you make like really good friends. Like you might find out that they love the same stuff you do, and then you have somebody to talk about whatever show you love that you can talk to every week. I mean, that's how these relationships with kind of the people in the field start. It's just talking about not boring stuff, exciting stuff, and then you can talk about the boring marketing stuff. And that's how I built a lot of friendships too. So I think just not being afraid to reach out. What's the worst they're going to do? Not respond, and then you move on. You found out that maybe that's the person you don't want to have in your life as a support system. So
yeah, in addition to that, I think a lot of the online communities are thriving for this reason. Women in tech SEO, if you work in SEO and you identify as a woman, is amazing. Everyone there is extremely supportive. Superpath is great for content folks. There are free communities on Slack that you can join, and people are there. Like, it's a kind of incredible, like you post something and you get a response, and I honestly, like, it stuns me every time. So if you like, I totally agree, like reach out to folks, but if you're like, I don't even know who to reach out, like communities are good. Just look at what other people are saying and like post questions or start there. I've seen a lot of freelancers and solopreneurs in those, I think for the exact reason you're citing, John, which is like, you don't have a built-in work community, so you have to like go find one, which is intimidating. But I think that these communities have been a good kind of like stopgap for that. And then you can figure out who, like, you'll start to find people you have in common with, and you can build from there. But yeah. I know I just plugged a couple, like Traffic Think Tank's really cool, but it costs money. So just like poke around, see what Slack communities are there. I'm sure there's a ton of Facebook groups too that have specifically to do with what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think there's Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, you.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's a great advice. So I think it's more on the community and one-on-one basis. Okay, so I think there are a lot of free communities and paid communities as well for marketers to join. I think freelancers can take advantage of this. And also, I think the closer connections will be the one-on-one. So LinkedIn is a great place for this one-on-one communication. Like I think I've learned a lot, gained a lot from LinkedIn. So freelancers that don't work with a corporate organization, that don't have corporate frameworks for wellness, they don't have corporate HROs. I think you have the entire internet as your HRO or as your community. Yeah, I think you have a larger framework actually to stay sane and work well. So I think these communities, there are a lot of Slack communities, Facebook communities, a lot of paid communities as well. And there are some paid communities you join and you get access, like the owner of the community becomes your mentor in a way, like a one-on-one communication, can access the person easily. I think these are opportunities that freelancers can exploit to actually improve the kind of work they do and build a community around themselves.
Sure.
Nice. And to kind of segue the conversation a bit, you talked about a bit before when we're talking about companies and supporting companies. Are there any companies that are doing anything right now targeted towards mental well-being or mental health that you guys admire?
I've written about them a couple times, but Bolt moving to the 4-day work week, I think that's a big step in the right direction. And they're like, what I like about it is they're like putting their money where their mouth is. Like they have their own site, they're owning the domain. I mean, they're really owning that as their cause, and they're putting research behind it, and they're really trying to help other companies navigate it, which I think is massive. Because I mean, I'd love to go to a 4-day work week. Everyone probably would, but like how you like this, the same with like Amanda was saying, bringing those mental health classes into your company. Like, where do you even start that conversation? And I think with that 4-day work week hub, I think they're calling it, it gives you kind of some resources to bring it to your company. So
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to say, because I think that, to our earlier points, so much of it is internal, and you can do things that you can talk about externally, but until you're in that culture, you don't know. And I've been very fortunate that my current company and my last company, I have felt completely fine talking about, like, I have a mental illness, and talking about that, taking mental health days. Like, I don't feel the stigma there. And to me, that's key. If you can have every program in the world, but if you still feel like, I can't talk to my boss about this, or I feel like they're gonna have a weird reaction, or they're gonna ask me why I'm taking off, or like, yeah. I think the culture piece is really important. So that's why, like, there are companies doing great stuff. 4-day work week, sign me up. I would love a 4-day work week. I see people mentioning Headspace, amazing app. Like, there are so many different things you can do, but also having those conversations and feeling like you are in a safe place to talk about it is really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's one thing to give you a Headspace subscription, which is great. We do it, but it's another thing to have people actually have that culture of support and openness. And I'll be honest, I worked in insurance before I came to tech, so very big shift for me. I think it was very like Mad Men-esque, and everyone was dressed up every day, and a big reason why I left. And I came to Brandwatch, which is the parent company of BuzzSumo originally. I think on my second or third day there, we had like a mental health first aid, event, and people were just talking very openly about their struggles and their challenges they were facing, what led them to become mental health first aiders. And I'll be honest, like, my first thought was like, wow, I can't imagine doing that. Like, it was so shocking to me. And, slowly over time, like, it just, you get in constant that culture, and you start to just feel comfortable. Because I was new, I didn't feel comfortable that day, but it was just that steadiness of support systems and people being open. And, that eventually made me feel more comfortable being more open with people about my life and what I'm struggling with at the time. So I think it's a really good point. It's just a constant battle in a way to make people feel comfortable.
Yep.
Yeah. And I feel like the Headspace is like the base level. Like, if they're doing that, that's just a band-aid of like, yeah, we're addressing mental health, we're giving them Headspace memberships, but that's
like, all you're doing. That's not.
Yeah, that's like the base level.
Great.
That's what you should be doing. What's everything else you're doing?
Yeah, like, I pay for Headspace. I'd love if, like, great having, but yeah, it's right. It's like that experience of actually talking to people that you're talking about, Evan. Like, that's the foundation.
Yeah,
and then everything else builds on it.
Yep, that's pretty fair. And one of, like, the last question, so we'll leave some time for Q&A. So if any questions pop in the question box. We talked about it a bit, but I'd love to hear people in the chat as well. Do you have any specific tools or strategies to keep yourself focused and manage your time and be more productive? And we've hit on that a little bit, but we'd just be curious if we could share in the chat if you haven't shared already, because it seems like the chat's been going pretty well. If you have any specific tool strategies, leave them in there, and we'd love to see them. But for all of you, anything, we talked a lot about blocking out times and calendars. Is there anything more tactical, or simpler in some cases, that you guys use to stay productive?
Yeah, I think treating it like a normal job. Like, I get dressed every day. I used to just like work in whatever I slept in. And I think just having transitions, like I said, going to my office and having transitions of like, now I'm in work mode, and now I'm putting on my work clothes, even though I'm basically in like sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Like, it's different than what I had on when I was sleeping.
Those are work clothes now. Yeah. T-shirts and hoodies too.
And having that routine where every day you follow it, and it just becomes part of, I mean, it becomes your commute. I don't want to call it that, but it kind of is, just walking up the stairs or walking to your office and just making that break between the two, between the personal life, between that. And then the second thing is just having a spot you can go when you need to do that deep work, that's not distracting. It could just be you're throwing your headphones on and that's your deep workspace. But having a different spot where you can kind of turn your brain either on or off, where you can go do that deep work, is really important.
Yeah, very true. I think the major challenge with working remotely, in contrast to the office work, is when you work in an office, you leave your home to the office. Okay, so on transit, you move from being a member of a family to an employee in an organization. So there's this switch from your personality to another person that works in an office. But when you work remotely, sometimes your bed is very close to you. You just slide out of your bed and onto your desk and start working. And you might not really have transition from that, sorry about that, from that house mode to the work mode. So actually creating a work routine for yourself, like Ryan said, really helps. Now, if you don't have a specific office or a specific room in your house where you can do this, but not everybody will have that, you can just create a particular you can call it a ritual. So it can be a particular dress you wear, or a particular spot in your house where you go to sit, or just something that is different than what you normally do. That acts like a switch into the work mode. So I think that really helps.
Yeah, part of my routine every morning is making coffee, and that's part of the transition phase. Is like, I'm gonna start making my coffee. That means my brain needs to work in like 20 minutes. So just taking time to do that every morning and having those built-in routines like you would if you're going to an office. I mean, maybe if you went to the office, you'd get Starbucks every morning. That's just part of your routine. Just build that into your work from home life too.
Yeah. The only thing I'll plug that I learned, I think it was the Hidden Brain podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way, was about habit forming. And because I'm terrible at forming habits. And one of the pieces of advice were basically to do the very bare minimum of what that habit is. And that's it. So the example that they provide is, if you want to start running more, don't say, I'm going to start running more, or I'm going to run every day, or I'm going to run 3 times a week. Say, I'm going to put my sneakers on.
Yeah.
That's the bare minimum iteration. Now, what happens is most of the time you're like, well, I have my sneakers on, I might as well go. Like I'm most of the way there. It's getting over that first hurdle. This is literally the only thing that has ever worked for me. And I do it with writing. I say that, like, for my creative writing outside of work, I have to write a sentence a day.
100%.
That's the rule I have for myself. Sometimes I only write a sentence, but hopefully once you've opened the notebook and put pen to paper, you'll write a little bit more. So I'm just sharing that because I was like mind blown, had no idea that was a tactic. And it's the only thing that I've ever found success with, rather than just being like, I'm going to just start doing this thing I've always meant to do for the last, decade.
Yeah. Love that. You use that
100%.
all the time. It's like, as long as you get the intro done, you're like, oh, I can write the rest of it so quickly, so easily. You just like, but looking at that blank page is so intimidating. But if you can just do a little bit of it, if you can even put your name on it, or you can title it, like just something small like that.
Start.
Where it's not a blank page with that cursor just mocking you, like, as you're trying to come up with a good idea. I think just those small steps that kind of put you in the right direction are big now.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah, true.
And I think we're gonna have time for one question, but I thought this one was pretty interesting. We put so many cards on the table, we talk about the good and bad of being, I think I know the answer to this, but James asked, would you still recommend becoming a marketer, as I'm a student studying it at the moment?
100%. I got my degree in economics, so I didn't study marketing. I just kind of fell into it, and it gives you so much career. I don't want to say longevity, but I mean, you can do a lot of different things in marketing and work for a bunch of different companies. You could work for sports teams, you could work for anything. Everyone's going to need marketing forever, and there's not going to like fall off. It's not going to like disappear. So getting in it and building your skills and just building upon it. Yeah, I always recommend people can do it. And like I said, I got my degree in economics. You don't have to study marketing. You can study something else. And if you're driven and if you get the field, you'll succeed. And there's a lot of free courses and all that stuff if you don't want to go to college to become a marketer. Like, you can learn a lot from free courses. So yeah, I'm always recommending marketing for people.
Yeah, 100%. Like Ryan, I got my degree in engineering, so it's like a far cry from marketing.
Yeah.
So you don't have to. I think I started studying marketing in my final year. Sorry, in my third year in school. I started with copywriting, then took content and the rest of them. So you don't really have to study marketing, and if you're studying it, it's a plus. So 100% jump into the wagon.
Yep. I didn't start writing until my sophomore year of college. Like, that's the first time I wrote. So like, there's never too late to start. Like, I wasn't writing creatively or anything in middle school, high school, anything. So just get started.
Yeah.
All right, that's great to hear. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being so open and honest and transparent, about these topics, which are tricky, but we want to talk more about. And I want to thank everyone for listening in, but also for posting in the chat. And the same applies to all the listeners. So everyone was so open in the chat. And what I'm excited to do after this call is kind of just go through the chat.
The chat was very interesting. I was playing it gradually.
Y'all killed it.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And it was great having you.
For sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, enjoyed this. This is great.
Yeah.